Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're going to have a little update on Amber and Legolas. Now, we just released the other day his lunging work, which was what was done before she just got on him here now. So that was just a little bit of 5 minutes of lunge work just to warm him up, getting over his back and swinging nicely before she gets on into the walk. And of course, here we start the walk all the way into the stretch, as always, no matter how high a horse's level of achievement is. We still start at the same place every day. That is the stretch all the way down, swinging and active in the walk, just like you would do if you go to the gym, I hope, and you warm your body up stretching a little bit before you begin to engage the muscles too intensely. Also, how we avoid injury, just like with people. So here you can see this horse has clearly developed a lot of top line. He has a lot of swing in his walk. And now he's beginning to develop real impulsion. That is energy that you can control by just releasing into a direction, so to speak. Think of impulsion as the result of the horse's level of condition, or as a symptom of it, so to speak. When real impulsion is not tension, and it's not anger, it's not getting the horse frustrated and stiff. It's an expression of the horse's level of physical conditioning, as opposed to making the horse nervous. When he has a certain level of physical conditioning, the horse can just do what you ask it to do very easily. And that expresses itself in impulsion, just letting that energy flow through the body of the horse. And when you can control that, then you have real impulsion. So here you can see she's still just stretching out, doing some just easy, simple leg yields here, where we always start with every horse every day, just beginning to give them the same sense of being able to stretch a little bit. You notice how he really can reach through these days with this walk. Even though he'll come up and down a little bit, he's still just warming up here and getting used to her weight on top of him, that is. Now this is a horse that tends to want to bunch itself up quite a bit. He doesn't have a lot of flexion in his hind legs. He has plenty of flexion when he's working over his back, but when he's not over his back, you'll see a very straight hind leg on this horse. And once again, that's why it's so important for all of you who don't have $1,000,000 horses with these incredible movers like we have these days. But you can make all of your horses can learn to collect, with a very few exceptions, those being the horses that are just so completely straight in the hind legs that they have no ability to take weight on their hindquarters and flex their hocks at the same time. But always remember that that's kind of a misnomer when people talk about this. It's not, we don't want to pull the horse back onto its hindquarters. This idea that you can pull a horse onto its hindquarters is just nonsense, because all that does is shorten the stride. So when the horse is really working through its back, that stride completes itself through the back, and that's really what lifts the front end out of the way, and that's what we could say real collection is. You can even see here in the walk, this is a horse when he first began, he would forage every now and that sort of thing, because he was just trying to find himself. He's a very big horse that grew a lot after Amber got him and fleshed out enormously. So it took a long time for him, a couple of years for him to mature into himself. And now he has, and he's working long enough that we can now sustain collection on him for a period of time. And always remember that the amount of collection you can sustain is always limited to the level of how hard the horse has been working. In other words, that's why we always work towards a goal of having 1 day a week being the level of whatever we do is the hardest thing we do with the horse, that we just can't do the same things every day. We do a lot of preparation work, just like for us, if we were in any kind of competition, you don't go out and compete every day, you'd be burnt out. Same thing is true of the horse. So today we've worked him, this will be the day that he is going to collect today, so he did a little bit of lunging, just enough to warm him up, get him swinging over his back, a little walk here. And then we'll see what level he can come up into. But here the walk is clearly swinging. He's got his neck really down and out. You notice how in the very beginning he tended to want to curl back a little bit when she first started. That's always a sign of the horse not really swinging through his back the way we want them to. But you look at the top line on this horse, you can clearly see how the underside of his neck is completely relaxed, and notice how long and swinging that walk has become. And that's what we want to see before we start bringing it in the other direction, always, every day. We want to get the neck all the way out there so the back can really pull up, withers can pull up through the shoulders, really lift the back underneath you. In other words, just warming up. We're taking a moment to move all those joints and muscular structure into the position that will be most healthful for it. So the horse has been standing around in a stall, which most of our horses here unfortunately have to do. These horses have pens and runs, but still it's not like they're out in the pasture where they're moving all day long. So it's even more important when we keep horses in stalls that we do give them plenty of time, because they're not out there moving around. So it takes even a little bit longer to warm them up a little bit, especially if they're a big horse like this. He tends to warm up kind of slowly. But now we have a good swinging walk. You can see how beautiful that neck is out long and in front of him. And always remember, this horse is capable of collection, but where his head and neck is going to be in a very different position than one of these horses that's built like an Andalusian or Lusitano, these big sloping shoulders. That's what they bred into so many of these dressage horses today, very much like saddlebreds and these kinds of things, so that we can get this phony head and neck position. Now, those horses can all go correctly like any other horses, and in fact should, but it's easy to get this phony frame of them. So remember, with a horse like this, you can see his neck is not built that way. His neck is built more thoroughbred-like in that it comes more straight out of the body and forward. So while he'd be capable of collection, he's never going to have a really high, super high head and neck position. But you'll see as he comes into collection here as we move on, that it comes surprisingly higher than it is now. And here she's just moving on to the shoulder in. Once again, we're looking for that swinging back, letting the biggest step come through and under. Remember, the importance of all the lateral work is here we get asking the horse really to step to that point that really lifts his back. When he pushes off that inside hind leg, we feel that stride complete itself a little more through the back, and that usually brings the neck out a little further in front of us. So that's really how we get a stretch with the aids, as opposed to just a trick of getting the horse to stretch down with a piece of candy or something out in front of him. But once again, the importance of just a good warm-up to wherever you're going. The actual hardest thing we're going to do, just think about any other kind of competition, with the exception of things that are endurance-oriented. You know, most of the time we work a lot just to do a very short little thing. We have to build a lot of strength. In other words, just like running sprints, for instance, or swimming sprints, or lifting heavy weights. You can't do that all day long, so you have to build up to those kind of things, and then you do that hardest thing just a little bit of time. And remember that that's basically what collection is. It's weightlifting. So here she brings him up into a working walk. We see how clearly engaged the top line of the neck is and how soft the underside of his neck is. And you can really see how the walk here is now literally just lifting up more in the walk. And that's exactly what we want to do. So once we have our working position, from then the collection is the degree to which that stride is then elevated and lifted by pushing off of the hind legs, which once again lifts the front end. So a good steady shoulder in here, clearly bent all the way along the length of his body. And you'll see now this was a horse that was a very difficult horse to bend. He was a little bit roached back, and so not the easiest horse to bend in the world when it came to that. But as soon as he gets over his back, he's quite capable of bending as much as he needs to bend. Remembering the smallest circles that we do are still only 8-meter circles, let's say, so at a very advanced level. So that's not like the horse has to wrap itself around your leg, cutting itself in half, kind of bending in half. We never ask for that kind of, or that degree of bend. So it's very wrong to try to force the horse around your leg, so to speak, the way we see so many people doing, and ending up with a very shortened stride, because that means the horse will never bend. You can get a horse to cock its hindquarters to the inside, but that's not the same thing as bending. Bending is the entire length of the horse, bending the entire length of its body, which you see this horse does quite easily, and any horse does as soon as it gets over its back. So you can see how beautifully here now she just like lifts up and just restrains with her back a little bit. And whatever she loses in forward motion, the horse just lifts that walk up. We can see it just generally lift the whole body up and lift the stride. But we still see how the stride is completing itself. You see how it maintains the rhythm. If there is no rhythm, it basically doesn't mean anything at all. It means your horse is basically evading all the gymnastic quality of the exercise. So you can hear, what you can see with him here, how the shoulder in here has even brought him up. He's lifting up even a little bit more, working towards a collected walk. So you can literally see how the potential for movement is there when you see him go by. You can literally see how the whole back is lifted, that roundness and purposefulness in the step. A very marching rhythm that just shows how it's just going to take a little bit of touch of her legs and he's just going to come right off into his springs. Now we're going to start off here in the trot today, just starting to see, once he's ready to go, what we can actually get just right off the bat out of the walk. In other words, what level of collection will he obtain just by doing the warm-up and the walk before we then go and stretch. We'll always see a better level of collection after we stretch the trot, but just to show you how once they begin to come into this, how it becomes easier for them to do it and easier. So it no longer, collection is not a hard thing for a horse to do if it's been physically prepared to do it. You can see how careful she is here to be sure that he doesn't flex anywhere but at the pole. Now she's going to go into a nice half pass. Now you can clearly see him bending the whole length of his body here around her leg, but it's not an exaggerated wrap. In other words, it's not like the haunches are pushed in and cocked around the leg. The bend is in the entire length of the body. And you can see how upright he stays, but look at the length of the step of this horse. If you go back and look at earlier videos of him doing half passes, they were very short and stride kind of things. Now you can see how he can stay up and keep that same length of stride even though he's doing the half pass. So of course here, after doing that, that was a really good half pass. So we're going to let him come back to a stretch, of course, give him a little reward, and of course loosen those muscles again to let the blood flow back through the body. Always remember, a tight muscle has no blood flow. For a muscle to grow, it must bring oxygen there and nutrients. So if the muscle is tight, there's not a lot of blood flowing through it. So we have to come back and let it relax again and re-oxygenate the muscle. Remember, we're doing weightlifting here. There's an element of endurance kind of riding, to dressage, but dressage itself really is more about weightlifting. Endurance is a whole nother issue. And the tough part of doing endurance work with horses is getting them doing it, but yet keeping them over their backs. So there have been very few event riders, for instance, in history that have ever been able to really maintain a supple horse while having it fit enough to be able to do the full event as it used to be. So once again, not quite as good this way in the half pass, but you can see he's still taking a big, long, reaching step. Look how far the outside hind leg steps underneath the body. Now, we always like to keep them at a pretty good angle so the shoulder always leads. Remember how important that is. And just for people who are curiosity, I do half passes before I ever do haunches in with horses. It's a more natural movement, in my opinion, for them. Where most horses tend to go a little haunches in anyway. That's what we're always trying to avoid. So haunches in is not a really useful exercise. It is after you can do a half pass, I think, more so. But before so, it tends to be an exercise that really shortens the horse up. So we're very happy with those walk half passes today because they showed that real fluidity and how well he was able to stay up over his four legs and stay balanced. See how nicely and easily he comes back. Now she's going to bring him back up into a more collected walk here as we prepare to do the trot work. Now notice how clearly he's flexing at the pole and not back in the neck. How his whole neck just raised up. Now his neck looks quite a bit higher than it was, but it's not exaggeratedly so, nor is it broken at the third vertebra. And you'll see here with him at times he comes a little off the bridle, but yet still maintains the position of his back, which is the more important thing. So here we can see he's able to just get up underneath her in the walk and just step right up into a fairly collected trot here, just to start off. So I'm just showing you here today what's possible just right out of the walk. And that's pretty good. You can see he's pretty clearly lifting himself up. He's not quite as stabilized as we like him to get. So that tells me he's not quite comfortable to be in that position yet. So we will here in just a couple of moments give him a stretch. But we just kind of wanted to experiment with, well, let's see what's there. But look how even the forelegs work with the hind legs here. We can clearly see the diagonal pairs. You can clearly see the horse lifting off the ground, lifting the front end off the ground from the thrust of the hind legs. And what you'll see here is how much more, what a steady rhythm. And even when we go here, she goes for a little medium trot, and you see how the horse stays up in front. So that tells us that we're really beginning to confirm collection. The horse doesn't need to let the frame come longer to lengthen its stride like it would at a lower level when it hasn't developed to the point that this horse has. And how clearly she can just bring him right back up. She stretches her body up, and that brings him back up underneath her. There's no fight here. And here she does another little medium trot here on the diagonal. And you'll see how he stepped in a hole there in the arena, but look how quickly he recovered. And once again, that's part of the point of getting horses working over their backs. We see people today, the way they ride their horses, they have these $1 million arenas, and if there's the tiniest little hole, they bow a tendon or some such thing because they're not really balanced on all four legs. But you'll see a horse like that, as I saw at the last Olympic Games, Michael Jung, kind of almost miss a fence, but the horse was so over its back that it was going up a bank and started to fall, and the horse was just able to power right back up, just like that horse, just powered right over that little hole it started to step in. So here she comes back and begins to ask him for a little more stretch after that. So we just sort of checked out what was possible there to show you how he could come up out of that walk into that. But now we're going to go back and stretch him, of course, in the trot, and he'll have a much better, more fluent, collected trot after we do this. You can see how he was still just kind of fussing a little bit there to find his balance and find the right position he wants to be in there. And she gets him a little deeper like that. Now notice as soon as he gets there how that shoulder just freed up, and all of a sudden the stride begun to complete itself through his back a little more. All of a sudden, once again, if you look and you cover up the vision of his neck and head and neck and just look at the horse, you'll see that he's really quite lifting up, that he isn't really on the forehand at all here. It's just that his head and neck is down. But he has enough thrust through the back now to lift himself off of the forehand no matter where he is, where the head and neck position is. And here she clearly comes back into collection. You can see how beautifully he just came back up underneath her there. There was no struggling. Rhythm came back beautifully, and he stayed right underneath her. Now you also notice how with Amber, how much now that he is beginning to stabilize, everyone used to comment a lot about her legs being a little bit busy, and you can see how they bounce. It's just that kind of her size, the way her leg hangs not quite as down as far, but you can see how much stiller they're starting to become because he's a more stable platform to sit on. But look how beautifully uphill that is all through that. Same thing in the shoulder in here. We don't lose any rhythm, so that's a good shoulder in. Lost his balance for just a moment there, and she put her leg on. He comes right back up again underneath her. So really nicely done there. Now notice she is riding in a double bridle, but you notice how the curb rein is always nicely relaxed. Now he was a horse and still has that trouble because he does a nice medium trot here, how that swings through. And once again, get an eye for these real movements. That, the real extended trot and real medium trots are not that exaggerated a thing. It's not like you go back and watch those great rides, for instance, of Klaus Bachenhall that somebody posted not long ago. And you can see how it's not that dramatic a thing of these crazy shoulder extensions where the horse is throwing its front leg straight out from the shoulder. Once again, that's all caused from bracing the neck back against the shoulder and totally destroys the horse. That is, destroys all the joints in the horse's body. And that should be one's first indication about dressage. The whole idea and concept of dressage from the very beginning was Xenophon the Greek, was the welfare of the horse, that we could evolve a style of training that kept the horse's welfare in mind, and therefore we get them to be willing participants in what we want them to do because they accompany us and become companions rather than slaves to our desires, so to speak. But a horse that really wants to be with you and really wants to do this work is always going to be a safer one than doesn't. A horse that doesn't like the work is never a safe horse. So she came back to a really good stretch there. Now notice how he comes back even up into a little more collection here. She set that time. Look how seamlessly that flexion at the pole just came right up underneath her back. Now notice here, now how much more fluent this is than when she first started. You can clearly see how those springs, it just looks like he's springing along with each step and how completely balanced he is. So we could say this horse is now in full collection. Now, he will develop this collection even beyond this, and you will see more elevation of the forehand. And yes, his extensions and medium trots will get a little bigger, but once again, a real extended trot is not anything like the thing that we're now seeing at horse shows. So back into the half pass here, once again, notice how nice he's able to stay up right over his body. He didn't lose a lot of stride in the course of that. He didn't shorten up, and that's exactly what we want to have happen. If you go what is supposed to be in your working gait or collected gait and you go into a lateral work and the horse shortens, well, that tells you the horse wasn't really working over its back, or you lost it over its back when you went into the more difficult movement. But the thing to get is when these movements are done correctly, you gain impulsion from them. And that's the first thing to realize when you're getting good at shoulder in. Your horse gains movement from it rather than loses it, if you've been doing it right all along and not just shortening the horse. But also notice how beautifully straight he's now becoming. You can see him going down the long side. This was quite a crooked horse, very one-sided. And once again, the only way to really straighten a horse is to get it to lift its back. That's what allows you to straighten the horse. So, any system that doesn't recognize that really doesn't understand how horses are straight or not. Let's hear another little half pass. She leaves him pretty wide in this angle there. This was always his little harder thing. You see he struggles there just a little bit with that. And of course, after that little more difficulty, we come back and she stretches him again. So whenever we feel the horse beginning to get tight, just like she did there, he started to get a little tight in that movement, so we come right back and reestablish that suppleness. That's what's important. forcing the horse to do these movements badly just never does anything but break the horse down. That's the thing you have to remember. Anything you're forcing the horse to do is probably counterproductive to what you ultimately want. So once again, you see how after that stretch he comes back and even has a little more bounce, and the collection becomes a little higher. He starts to lift off the ground a little more with the front legs. That's the result of the thrust. Now look how much more flexion is in the hocks now than when we first started. Now I remind you, this horse has been in training with me for about 3 years now. She had him for about a year before that. This horse has hardly ever had a day of unsoundness, none that I can really remember, other than he came with quite a few irregularities. But those all just disappeared with training. He does not get any kind of injections. And you look what a happy horse this is. But that's the thing to realize. If what you're doing, we see so many people, look how beautiful that is there as he comes across in that medium trot and stays steady up underneath her hands. So, you know, if you're spending more time with your veterinarians than you are riding and you think that's normal, it's not. That's just a bad trainer wrecking your horse and taking your money for wrecking it and making a lot of money for veterinarians. And any veterinarian who doesn't understand this work, you should try to find another one. As a good veterinarian, I said I was very fortunate when I grew up to work with some of the best veterinarians in the country. And let me tell you, they understood how horses were supposed to work, and they would tell people why they were breaking them down. And here she just does a little lengthening around the circle there, and you can see how beautifully he stays up. You can literally just see that ball bouncing around. You can see those thrusts as it just bounces down the long side. And once again, look how straight he now is. So now this horse will just go on. Everything should just continue normally on up the training scale, so to speak. The collection is there. Now it just has to become a little stronger, a little more elevated. Look how beautiful that stride is there as he comes across there in that medium stride. But once again, note that his head and neck is not super high, but it is very much higher than it was when we started, if you notice that. But he's still staying soft at the pole, that being the most important thing. He's never breaking back in the neck. And look how even this stride looks right there. You can literally see the thrust of the hind leg lifting the horse off the ground. She brings him beautifully back into a walk. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride with my associate trainer Amber Matusik and the wonderful Legolas, who has taught her a great deal and hopefully is teaching all of you a great deal as well. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Everyone have a happy Thanksgiving here coming up. I look forward to seeing you all next year. Looks like we're going to have a lot of exciting things coming on, as well as the World Dressage Federation should launch right around the first of the year or slightly thereafter. So keep a lookout for that. I'm hard at work on the new test for everyone, and we'll have those released to our associate trainers to start riding here pretty soon. So great job, Amber. Look forward to seeing everybody soon.